Yoshev Besecha Elyon B'Tzel Shadayit Lonan. Omar Leronai Machsi Mushudati Elohai Eftachbo. Kihu Yatzilcha Mipach Yakush. Videver Chayot. Bezrato Basechala Betachat Kenafav Techset Sina Usohera Amito. You who dwell in the shelter of the Most High, abiding in the shadow of the Almighty. I say of the eternal God, my refuge and stronghold, my God in whom I trust, that God will deliver you from the ensnaring nets. God will shelter you. Beneath God's wings shall you find refuge. Faith in God shall be your shield and protector.
This time we are going to begin the graveside services here for Mrs. Sheila Novak Anderson. As we begin the service, I would ask if any of you has a cell phone or any other noise-making device, please turn them off at this time. Officiating the service here today is Rabbi Jeffrey Weil from Ezra Habanim, the Niles Township Jewish Congregation in Stoughton. Thank you.
Adonai ma'adam v'teda ehu, ben enosh v'techach vehu. Adam lehel v'dama. Yemat ketzel over b'boki atzitz v'chalaf. La'erev yimolel v'yavesh. These are the words of the psalmist saying, Adonai, eternal God, what are we that you have regard for us? And what are we that you would even be mindful of us? We're all just a breath, our days a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up and is renewed, and in the evening it fades and withers. But God, you cause all of us to return unto dust, saying, Shuvu b'nei Adam, return, O mortal ones. Would that we were wise, would that we understood whither we go from here. For when we die, we carry nothing with us, not our glory, not our riches. But God, you say, Shmur tam or Eyashar, mark the wholehearted, you hold the upright. Those are the ones who shall find shalom, who shall find peace. We gather today to remember one who was Tam v'Yashar. She was wholehearted, she was upright, she was very much herself, she was creative in the kitchen, and she was loving. Sheila Novak Anderson. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach be'etzat rasha'im, v'derech hata'im lo amad, v'moshav leitzim lo yashav. Happy are those who do not follow the counsel of the wicked, or take the path of sinners, or join the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight. They study holy teaching by day and night. They are like a tree planted by streams of water. It yields its fruit in season. Its foliage never fades. Its fruit always flourishes. You'll find in your handouts the 23rd Psalm. I'll read the 23rd Psalm first in Hebrew, and then we'll read it together in English, which is on an inside panel. Adonai ro'i lo afsar. Binodesha yarbitzeni, ametin minochoti nahaleni, nafshia shovev. Yancheni v'magleit tzedek l'man shemo. Gam ki elech b'geit hamavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shiptecha mishantecha hema yinachamuni. Ta'aroch l'fanai shulchan neged sorai. Tishanta b'shem roshi kusi ravaya. Ach tov v'chesed yudafuni kol yemei chaya. Deshafti b'veit Adonai la'orech yamim. We read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The verses from the third chapter of Kohelet, or in English we call it Ecclesiastes, are familiar. These verses are familiar from popular folk song. They convey this sort of challenging theological idea that everything in the world, everything in our lives unfolds the way we expect them to, or that there's a reason and a time and a place for every purpose under heaven. In other words, everything that goes on in our lives. And that's a difficult theology sometimes to accept, that things unfold in a way that we think that they're supposed to unfold. I find that to be challenging, to say the least, because we know how life really is at times. And yet our tradition, our biblical tradition at least, sort of guides us in that direction. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted, a time to tear down, a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve, a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time when we must refrain from our embraces, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to discard, a time to tear, a time to sow, and a time for silence and a time to speak. So it is a time to tear now. It's also a time to speak. I'll be sharing words about Sheila Anderson in a moment, but we'll also do a tearing ritual. The mourners, John, Cindy, and David, are wearing the ribbons, the Kriya ribbons. Kriya means tearing. And the tradition is when a Jewish person dies, their mourners, their loved ones do a tearing, a ritual tear. And in the Bible, when something sad would happen or something calamitous or some shocking thing would happen, our biblical forebears would do their own kriya, do a tearing. And so that is what we do now. So I'll come to the three of you. You'll repeat the blessing after me. It concludes with the words Dayan Ha'emet, which means the judge of truth, or the true judge. And when we do the blessing, after we do the blessing, we'll do the tearing. So just expose the ribbon. So repeat it. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan Ha'emet. Amen. Said, blessed are you, eternal our God, ruler of the universe, the judge of truth. A time to tear, now a time to speak. And so I appreciated our conversation yesterday, and sharing with me about Sheila. Yesterday was actually Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the Hebrew month of Adar. And our sages said that when Adar enters, when the Hebrew month of Adar enters, that we should marbim b'simcha, we should increase joy. And that's because the holiday of Purim occurs in Adar. This year, we have a double month of Adar, so it'll be in the second Adar. But still, the commandment is Adar comes and we increase in joy. You are beginning this month of Adar, not with a increase of joy, obviously, but with an increase of sorrow, of sadness, for you mourn the passing of Sheila Anderson. But it's counterintuitive, but perhaps within the sadness that you are experiencing, there's a way not to avoid sorrow, but also to perhaps to find some solace, not joy, but solace, and maybe in a way a certain measure of joy too. Because although Sheila will obviously be deeply missed, as you expressed to me very poignantly yesterday, as you grieve, you also appreciate. It's also been clear who she was to you, the kind of woman that she was, and what she accomplished as well. You spoke to me about her with tremendous admiration for her efforts on behalf of the Jewish community, for her industriousness in the kitchen primarily, for her genuineness as well, her genuine and real personality, for being very much herself, and for her ability to make friends and to maintain friendships, and of course for her love for all of you. She was the daughter of Rose and Max, and the family had come to this country through New York, but also through Galveston, Texas, and that was something that she had recorded and researched. The Novak family was active in the small, close-knit Omaha Jewish community. They were in the real estate business. Sheila, as a young woman, was looking for a job, and she interviewed at the elegant Blackstone Hotel in Omaha. She interviewed with the personnel director, young man, several years older than she, still a young man though. That would be John Anderson. They were put into a tiny, tiny office. And the expression is that familiarity breeds contempt. But that's not what happened with Sheila and John. John found young Sheila Novak refreshing. But this was a young woman, just as it would be throughout her life. This was a person who said what was on her mind. And they fell in love. John had been raised in the congregational tradition, but he had discovered that Judaism, through Sheila, suited him very well. And the eminent Rabbi Meyer Kripke ushered him through the conversion process and officiated at their wedding. At that time, this is the early 60s, blending families with different religious traditions was certainly more unusual than it is today. But their families, they all managed it successfully. Sheila was devoted to John's parents and family as she was to her own parents' family. And she was always beloved by cousins and more. The Jewish community became a regular aspect of the Anderson family for Sheila and John, and also for Cindy and David when they came around to complete the family. They were all involved in the congregational life at Beth El, and involvement for Sheila, at least as far as synagogues are concerned, that meant being busy in the kitchen, at least in large parts. Sheila was always a flurry of activity. She was like a nonstop person. And she would take the lead in preparing meals and desserts for B'nai Mitzvah meals and more. She and John were also involved in B'nai B'rith, Hadassah, and more. And I see that you have identified Jewish organizations for contributions in her memory, which is appropriate for the life that you led and for who she was and what she cared about. And those early years, Sheila focused on raising her two children. She was the stricter parent, I am told, and she set high expectations for Cindy and David in terms of academics and being involved in productive activities and more. She also, I'm told, would read to the two of them, including A Wrinkle in Time, and I'm sure a lot more. She valued education. You both did, I know, valued education and books and so forth. The family had other kinds of fun too, including their annual car journeys. They went to various places throughout the nation. And Cindy and David, they didn't have a station wagon, so they would be sitting in the back seat together, and they got along thanks in part to the incentives their parents offered. I'd assumed that those incentives would have been Sheila's baked goods, but they were not. They were things like books and so forth. So it just shows the emphasis on learning and that prevails in this family. They also would later travel to England and to Mexico. Cindy and David went on to pursue higher education at University of Wisconsin and Northwestern, respectively. And then when John received an opportunity to go to Houston, to have an opportunity in Houston, he and Sheila moved there. Not surprisingly, Sheila found herself in the congregation kitchen of Congregation Beth Am, which later became Or Ami. And then in her mid-40s, this is not something that is done too often, she made a move, a big decision, it seems to me, turning her talent and hobby into a business by launching JS Sweets Catering. JS for John and Sheila, JS. And I think that makes sense. I know it does, for it is clear how close John and Sheila were. So it makes sense that J and that S are right next to each other, how good they were for each other for more than 60 years. There's a midrash that our sages created about God creating matches in heaven. That's Beshert, putting two people together. And I've got to believe this was Beshert. For what are the chances, after all, that you, John, and Sheila would be placed in this tiny office together? What are the odds of that happening? You were meant to be. And so at that time, when she started JS Catering, she embarked on this successful catering business. John was in charge of administrative end of things and a taste tester. They also began embarking on cruises, 25 cruises. That's a lot of cruising, really, around the world. China, Southeast Asia, Amsterdam, I'm sure other places, Europe, river cruises, and more. Sheila, when they were on their cruises, just like was her custom throughout life, made friends, just as she had always, with ease. She would make friends and she would keep friends. When they were back home in Houston, they kept busy with their respective duties and obligations, and they also frequently came up here to Chicagoland to visit family. Cindy, Ron, and of course, granddaughter Rachel. They are in these photos with their granddaughter Rachel. You could see that John and Sheila are just beaming with pride. To Rachel, Sheila was Baba, a name that Sheila cherished. This grandmother who could not keep still. She was always so active. She would awake when visiting. She would awake at dawn to get busy in the kitchen. And the granddaughter, who did not usually awake that early, would hear her grandmother down in the kitchen, and she'd go down to help. And Ron, son-in-law, would often come in to help as well. And the three of them would be creating things together, yes, in that kitchen, but there was one person who was in control, and that was Sheila, Baba. She even, when she was here just visiting, she prepared desserts for Anshe Tikva, the synagogue up here. If it was a shul function and there was an opportunity to contribute, Sheila would do so. The kitchen was her kingdom. And it did not even have to be, or queendom. And it did not even have to be her kitchen. Utensils magically would appear in the Rosenberg kitchen. It didn't matter that it was not her kitchen, technically. She knew what she wanted. She knew the utensils that she wanted, and she would get them there. She also possessed cookbooks, collections of recipes. When you told me this, I was imagining dozens, couple score, but there are hundreds of them. And she had her special baked goods, and the ones in particular, the lemon bars, cheesecake with cherries, marshmallows on a stick, and the famous, and this is for Rachel, the famous Darth Mull. Darth Mull was wicked, but he tasted great. There's a famous quote from Rabbi Hillel from Pirkei Avot, from Ethics of the Fathers, or Chapters of the Fathers, which, when I was thinking about what you told me about Sheila, it seems to suit her. It begins, and you might recognize it. It begins, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Sheila Anderson was fully herself. She was true to herself. She was completely unpretentious, and she was just real. She did what she loved. She spoke her mind. She was for herself. But then Rabbi Hillel continued, but if I'm only for myself, then what am I? And Sheila was not only for herself either. She made a lifelong contribution to her community, to Jewish organizations, to the synagogues that they were part of. She was committed, very committed to those she loved, certainly friends, extended family, and this family, of course, John, Cindy, David, Ron, Rachel. She was for you. And then that saying by Rabbi Hillel concludes, and if not now, when? Sheila wasted no time. She did not sit still. She was a bundle of activity. Our sages said as well, let there be mourning at the time of mourning. Let there be rejoicing at the time of rejoicing. It's kind of an obvious sort of quote, obvious sort of sentiment, but sometimes, I think what they were getting at is that at times there could be a measure of both. One may be eclipsing another in large part, but still may there be both mourning now, which there is, and grieving, but may there be a measure of joy too, a measure of celebration. And I know it sounds, as I said, counterintuitive, but joy for having been part of her orbit, been at home with her, in that tiny office with her, in the kitchen with her, just with her for these years of her life and your lives together. May we celebrate all of it. Celebrate her creativity, her genuine self, her real self, her kindness, and her love. Zichronah livracha. May her memory be for blessing. Amen. Leida hi reshit, uftira tachlit, ha'chayin kamasahem, kahalicha, kitzmicha, mishalav l'shalav. Birth is a beginning, death a destination. But life is a journey, a going and a growing from stage to stage. And now the life journey of Sheila Novak Anderson has reached its ultimate destination. Oh God, we see life as through windows that open unto eternity. We see that love endures and that the soul endures, just as you, O God, endure. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. The years spent together, the love and partnership, teaching, happy occasions, they weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. We continue with the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kizoho HaRakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Yikara Shalonu, Shalcha Le'olama, Baal HaRachamim Yasireha B'Seter Kenafahav Le'olamim, V'Yitzvor B'Shor HaChaim Et Nishmatam, Adonai V'Nechalatam, v'tanuach shalom al mishkava v'nomar. Amen. Compassionate God, eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Sheila Novak Anderson, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence and within the shadow of your wings. Let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And we say, Amen. It is customary to put in the grave of a Jew earth or soil from the land of Israel. It represents a number of things, primarily the enduring Jewish hope and a better future for all humanity. May that be God's will. This is from the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. Amikobah, Tavo Shalom. May Sheila Anderson come to her eternal resting place in peace. Atzur tamim palo ki chol derechad mishpat. El emuna ve'in avel tzadik ve'yashar hu. Atzur tamim b'chol pa'al. God is sure, our immovable rock. All God's work is upright. Who can say, what is it that you do? The eternal governs above and below, overseeing both the valleys of death and the heights of life. God is sure, our immovable rock. Who can say to God, what will you do? You are righteous in all your dealings, in both death and in life, and every soul is in your trust. In a moment, we will recite Mourner's Kaddish. After reciting Mourner's Kaddish, I'll ask those of you who are here to support the mourners, the three mourners, from a halakhic point of view, from a Jewish law point of view, the three mourners, there are traditional words of comfort to say to them. You could just repeat after me at that time, and then we'll all have the opportunity, if you choose, to put, as we discussed, to put 3 measures of earth into the grave. One custom with this is when you do it, whether you using the trowel, is to put the trowel back in the pail for the next person as an affirmative act to take that out and to do that. And another custom is, if we're using the shovel as well, to use the back of the shovel for 1 or 2 or 3 of those measures into the earth, into the grave. Oh God, help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand, that the pain which this loss inflicts is the measure of a love that will outlast and is stronger than death. Though we cry in our hearts, may we also be like children who know that you, O God, their ultimate parent, is near, and who cling unafraid to the trusted hand. In this spirit, O God, do we commit all that is precious to us into your keeping, as we now repeat words hallowed by generations. If it's comfortable for you to stand, you may stand, or you can sit. That's okay too. Mourner's Kaddish. And Mourner's Kaddish is in your handouts. Mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gedal, Yit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divra firte be'amlich machute. Bechayechon uvyomechon. Uchaye defol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman karib imru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mivarach La'alam Olame Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal Shmei Kudasha Barichu La'ela Minkol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechamata Da'amiran Be'amat Imaru Amen. Yehi Shalom Ra B'min Shmayim V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mamav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Now please, all those who are gathering here to support the mourners, repeat these words after me. May God console you with all who mourn in Zion and Jerusalem. Hamakom inachem etchem b'toch shavlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. Now go forth in peace unto life. Amen.
I didn't know. Just for no ways to I need. That's fine. Thank you. As far as yes. So,
Folks, as people continue to participate in the midst of the burial, a couple of brief announcements. First, you're invited to a gathering at the clubhouse of Village Green South from 3 to 8 today. That information's on the inside portion of the funeral service folder you should have received. If you did not receive one, they are available as you depart. I'd also ask that you please take note that the family has asked for memorial contributions to be made to the ADL and B'nai B'rith. That information's on the folder as well. For those of you watching online, that information is on the website you are currently on. Thank you. Also, for those watching online, we will be terminating the live stream in the next few minutes.
yeah. It's time. I got